Is it sharing now?
Yep, you're good.
Got it. Okay. I am truly blessed to have this opportunity to share both my love for community and my passion for my artwork. When Hillary Dubenstein, our director, invited me here before you to share my art, I contemplated how my work as a community artist went along with the mission of Shalom Aleichem. On your website, it says, hold on one second. Hold on, it's got to get to the next slide. Why isn't it going? It says you are a bridge between past and future. Through my presentation, I will share how an exhibition from our collective past, from a community annihilated by the Holocaust, informed my mission and future destiny as a Jewish artist. My foray in formal education into Jewish art began in 1973 when I was a student at the University of Michigan in the School of Art. Like students today, I too wanted to find a summer internship, but I wanted to be in New York City, where every artist dreams of going. With the help of my mom, an incredible typist extraordinaire, I typed over 40 letters, cover letters, and resumes to go to museums throughout the city. Miraculously, I received 2 offers. The first was from the Frick collection, but the second was from the Jewish Museum on 92nd and 5th Avenue. You guessed it, with my mother's strong encouragement, I went to the Jewish Museum. Their collection was originally housed at the Jewish Theological Seminary, but in 1947, the collection was moved to this location in the Felix and Frida Warburg Mansion, one of the very stylish homes at the time. It is here where I became immersed in Jewish art. I was like the person going on vacation substitute, so every week I got to be in a different department, from conservation to the gift shop. After the gift shop, I was in membership, answering telephones, but it was the week that I was in the basement vault that was my most memorable. In the conservation area was a collection of Judaica that was sent in 1938 from Danzig, Poland. Because of the impending war, they sent their collection to the JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary at the time, for safekeeping. I remember I was polishing the silver ritual objects, the rimonim embellished with beautiful jewels. These are placed on top of the Torah finials around which the parchment is wrapped. There's a word called hidur mitzvah, which means to beautify the commandment. And these beautiful silver ornaments beautify the commandment of reading Torah. This collection was to sit on these shelves for over 35 years until the summer that I was there. And initially, when they told me I would be polishing silver, I think my eyes looked up, and not knowing that I would not be bored, but it would be life-changing for me. This collection, when it came to the JTS, had a written agreement that they could reclaim the Judaica. They just wanted it preserved during the war years. But sadly, they had 15 years to reclaim, and the community did not exist 15 years later. And so these things sat here year after year. I realized as I was holding this exact Torah breastplate that I was touching something from a now lost community. I can feel my hands trembling now, just as they were trembling then. I'm a little nervous on Zoom, but really because it reminds me of my experience at that time, holding something from our past. This breastplate truly, being from the war years, being from Danzig, from a lost community, I realized the power of this artwork to sensitize and teach the history and the pain of the Holocaust. It was at this exact moment that I made a promise to myself as a 19-year-old student that through my journey as an artist, I would find a way to help others to experience their Judaism through the arts. Jumping ahead a few years, in 2009, I became involved in an arts installation that would truly change my life. It is a testament to the power of art to heal. These are the Kindertransport memory quilts, created in 1988 by 65 artists from around the world. What brought them together? The answer is a public broadcast on BBC, which aired a reality TV show to honor a man, Nicholas Winton. Nicholas had been working in London as a 28-year-old stockbroker just prior to the outbreak of World War II. Set for a career in banking and about to go on a ski holiday, a friend contacted him and asked him to please, don't go skiing, come to Prague, come visit me. But this visit brought him face to face not only with his friend, but the thousands of youngsters and families caught up in the plight of war. Working around the clock, he established an organization which rescued 669 children from Czechoslovakia. They were to become part of the 10,000 children from Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic, whose parents signed them up to be put on trains and boats and transported to safety in Great Britain. The children were between the ages, if you can imagine, 7 months and 17. They had name tags around their neck. It was heartbreaking to think that their parents were letting them go in order to hopefully save them and one day, hopefully, be reunited. It was heartbreaking for these parents. Nicholas, he was a very modest man, and although he saved these children, 669, he never spoke about it again, not for 50 years. 50 years later, his wife was in the attic cleaning it. Now, I've never been in my attic. I don't know about any of you. So the last place I would go to clean would be the attic. But there she was, and she found this, photographs of the children, all bound in a scrapbook. She gave these photographs to a TV station who aired a reality TV show, which, by the way, today we have reality TV constantly on our screens, but this was one of a kind, and I'm going to play that with you now.
All the letters. Right here is the list of all the children. This is Vera Dumont, now Vera Gissing. We did find her name on his list. Vera Gissing is with us here tonight. Hello, Vera. And I should tell you that you are actually sitting next to Nicholas Winton.
And it was just so wonderful, so terribly, terribly touching.
Is there anyone in our audience tonight who owes their life to Nicholas Winton? If so, could you stand up, please? All the letters.
It was not until this broadcast that Hannes Gross shared with his daughter that he was one of the children. She had always asked her father to tell the story, and he had not done it until then. But we know that it was not until the late 80s and 90s that survivors started speaking. Anita Gross was so overwhelmed with her father's story of how he survived with the help of the righteous that she said to her mother, who was not Jewish, but a Danish woman, but a wonderful quilter, "Mom, we have to tell Dad's story," and they decided to make a quilt. In order to do that, they reached out through the organization, the Kinder Transport Association, to let other Kinder, and by the way, the Kinder were no longer Kinder, they were 70, 80, 90 years old, asking them if they would make a quilt square to tell their stories. In the end, 65 of the people of the Kinder did so. They contacted Anita and Kirsten Gross, and they were sent a piece of fabric 10 inches by 10 inches, and they were asked with simple materials to tell their stories. This square is the one that they made for their father, Hannes Gross. Hannes Gross, his father, was taken on November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht, which is what the date says. Here we have a Chagall window shape, and inside the Jude star that they were forced to wear, but the broken star representing the night, the broken times that his father was taken to Dachau, and the night of all of the synagogues being broken. What I'm going to do now, I want to share with you that I was asked by one of the survivors, Hans Wyman, if I could find a home for the quilts. Hans Wyman, I met at a lecture that Mary Silber, who I'm shown here with, she was a quilt lecturer. And Mary spoke at a National Council of Jewish Women meeting, and she shared the story of these quilts and how she came upon them. And it was at this meeting that Hans Wyman said to me, "We have to find a permanent home for these quilts." His quilt square was very simple. He said he was an engineer, not very artistic, but he embroidered the names to honor Fanny and A. Davis, who you see is the second square, and it says, "In honor of Fanny and Abe for saving my life." So in being asked to find a home, I knew that these quilt squares had to not only be exhibited, but they had to have a voice. Each person who contributed the square also wrote a 2-page little document about their personal story, and those were put into a book form. But I had seen an article in the New York Times, and also it was copied in the Free Press, how today with the advent of technology, museum exhibits were becoming more interactive. So together, we decided that we had to have the voices of the children recorded. We could not work with the actual survivors, although a few of them did participate. But in order to recreate the voices, we worked with actors in our community. And by the way, Shirley Benyus, who's here with us today, listening to this, she was one of the voices who did several of the squares. Not only was she an early member of Shalom Aleichem, but she has really led our community in the arts. And it's their voices that tell the story. So when you see the exhibit, you press the button, and I'm going to share some of these with you now.
I have my doll and the shiny red suitcase Mother and Father bought me yesterday. But I'm on the train, and they're outside on the platform. I feel like crying. Father is holding onto my mother's shoulder and trying to smile as they wave goodbye. I know they would rather be with me, and that I must be brave. My stomach feels funny. Is London anything like Brussels? What will it be like to live with people I don't know, who speak another language? Will I ever see my home over our store again? Will I ever see my parents again?
Edith Mesh Reisfeld was awakened on November 9, 1938, Kristallnacht, at the sound of breaking glass. She fled with her family that night, and after a week of terrible uncertainty and fear of arrest, arrived in Belgium. There they arranged for Edith to escape to England on a Kinder transport train. The family was reunited 7 years later. Ruth Amster Meador.
I was only 7 and recall little of the circumstances of my leaving,
Kassel, Germany in January of 1939 for Amsterdam. What I do remember are the postcards we were given to write to our parents. They were lined for us younger children and pre-addressed by our parents. It was these postcards that crossed from Holland to Germany to England and finally to America, telling my father in the US of my whereabouts. My present family, husband and 2 sons, helped me make this square. It is to remember all who died and all who lived, and to thank all who helped. I am grateful to Great Britain for taking this handful of children, and to the United States for the opportunities to pursue my life.
Dear grandmother, when I first arrived in England, I lived in a hostel in Tynemouth. But when war broke out, they sent us to Windermere in what is called the Lake District. I live in a house provided by the Quakers with 22 other girls. We get along very well and are becoming good friends. I hope you are well and that we will see each other soon.
Ilse Camus Gross was born in Vienna in 1925. Her uncle and grandmother put her on a kinder transport train in 1939. She never saw them again.
This square, in submitting the square, he writes, the word says the Hebrew letters chet yud, which mean chai, life. But also you put them together and you see kind of like an animal with 2 legs. And Alexander Gordon says he was like a cat with 9 lives, the way he survived. And if you didn't hear his story or read it, you would see the train tracks which surrounded him. And it truly, these pieces, although they're beautiful in themselves, but actually hearing the stories and having an interactive exhibit really enhances the understanding.
I was given 9 lives, always seemed one step ahead of the stuff. Speaking from Hamburg, but still my fees, I qualified for transport out of Germany aboard Gilbert transport. I can redeem that I was interned as a German refugee and sent to Australia, one of 2,000 men aboard the Canal. We experienced starvation and other cruelties and were kept in a refugee camp in Australia for more than a year. Back, I joined the British Army and fought against the German homeland from 1941 to 1947.
Ron and Ora Gordon presented this square to their father, Alexander Gordon, on Father's Day in 1996. They used train tracks and toy trains in primary colors to symbolize the children who escaped from Germany on Kindertransport. A flame to symbolize the limitation and confinement Jews suffered, and the Hebrew letter Chai to affirm life and survival. The square itself is a symbol for the lesson their father taught them, to never forget.
This one here is one of my favorites.
Many of us on the train with only 2 ladies to look after everyone. Helping with the smaller children took my mind off the sadness of having to leave my parents. Now, here I sit on my suitcase waiting, my name tag around my neck. Oh, this is what little cats must feel like when they are separated from their protecting mother and delivered into human hands and left to human mercy. Not for the first time, I pray to God that all may be well. With this square, I thank all our humans who were more than merciful, those who saved us and those who cared for us and brought us up with so much love and compassion. In Czech, we have a fitting expression, Dublat Pam Bůh, which means, may the Lord pay you back.
Not only were those squares heart-rending, but for the artists, for the kinder, they were healing pieces. When I was asked where to put these quilts, what museum would accept them, I contacted Yad Vashem, I contacted the Washington Museum, but neither of them could accept the quilts for permanent display because they only accepted things from the war years. In the end, it was our Zeckelman Holocaust Center who accepted them for permanent exhibit. And I can't think of a more fitting place. It is truly a wonderful place that spreads the message. My project there led me to the next project, which was the Anne Frank sapling project. There had been an article in the New York Times about the Anne Frank tree that she wrote about in her diary. It was this tree that gave her hope when she would see the sparkling raindrops or the bird through the attic window. This tree was 150 years old, and the article stated that it was dying. The Anne Frank Center, USA, in New York City, it was their mission to continue to spread the message of Anne's diary, to preserve hope and justice for all people, and to work against hatred. And they decided when they saw this tree coming to an end, its life, that they would graft saplings, 10 saplings from the roots of this tree, and plant them in different parts of the United States to spread the message of hope and tolerance. And so they announced a competition for the saplings. This project, when I read about it, I shared it with my sister, who is equally passionate, Ann Plissman. And together, she and I, with Faggy Weiss, the librarian at the Holocaust Center, we applied for one of the saplings. There were, I believe, I'm going blank, was it 30 to 50 applications? And by the way, anyone could apply, but you had to realize that the horse chestnut tree has to grow in an environment similar to Amsterdam and to Michigan, where it's cold. So you had lots of things that you had to take in consideration to convince them that you wanted the tree for your special home. And so in applying, you see that the image on the right is a photograph of a sapling which was only 10 inches tall when it came to this country. We were awarded the tree, and it is in the garden here at the Holocaust Center in Farmington Hills. And it was placed in the most beautiful spot because when you go visit the museum, you first go through the area that's the history of the Jewish people, and then you enter the Holocaust period. And when you leave the Holocaust part of the museum and you walk up a ramp, it is right to this window, which is in the building area they call the Institute of the Righteous, that you see this flourishing tree. And it really does give you a sense of hope. It was a wonderful, wonderful project to work on. And when people come to the center, it's one of the highlights that they show off. And especially when kids come, we have schools from around the state that come, and many of them, they may not know a lot about the Holocaust, but they have been exposed to the Anne Frank diary. So to think that we have something that was really from her garden, it is truly so meaningful. You know, I talk about nature healing and I talk about art healing. Well, the power of art to heal took me to Children's Hospital, and I'm going to share with you some of the work that I do with healing. Working in the hospital, I work in a variety of different mediums. I paint t-shirts with the kids. It's one of their favorite things to do. Another medium that I work in is colored sand. I know most of us, when we think of sand, colored sand, we think of sand in a bottle. But this is actually done on a mounting board. And I was asked by some physicians at the hospital to work on a project for the outpatient clinic. The kids were not showing up for their shots after school. After all, they've been busy all day. The last thing they wanted to do was to come to the doctor to get a shot and have to wait 2 hours to see the doctor. But they thought perhaps if an artist came in and created something with the kids, that it would give them something to look forward to. So this is a piece that's 4 feet by 8 feet. And the theme of the project that I designed was stepping up to asthma care, because these kids were all coming for asthma and pulmonary treatments. And the idea of stepping up to asthma care, I explained to the kids, it's not just that we're stepping up in our gym shoes, and we know that all kids love their gym shoes. I think all adults love their shoes, but stepping up means taking responsibility. And I was trying to teach them that they too had to take responsibility and eat properly and exercise and take care of their bodies and souls in order to feel better. And not only did they start coming every week, and by the way, they all got to work on this. This was created with 8 by 10 pieces of board fit together like a big puzzle. But not only they worked on this, they also, you see the image of the little girl holding her Converse gym shoe. They got to make a gym shoe to take home. So not only did they start coming every week, but they brought their siblings and their parents because everybody wanted to make a gym shoe to put on their walls. I worked with colored sand with several of the transplant patients. And Gregory was a young boy who got a heart transplant. He was in the hospital for 366 days, not that he was counting. But he liked to sleep all day and play video games all night. And the doctors and the nurses were having a really challenging time with him. So they asked if I could possibly do some artwork with them that might engage him during the day. So you see here, we did a portrait of the Greek Freak, his favorite basketball player from the Milwaukee Bucks. We did several portraits, and this did keep him up the days I was there creating art. And the image on the right, a little girl was leaving the hospital after 2 months. She had had a liver transplant, and she told me she wrote a poem. And the poem was, "Cancer is no match for me. My liver is now disease-free. I beat it with a transplant. Now I'm back to being me." So we designed a poster-sized sand art for her to do, and she just walked out of the room, out of the hospital, beaming with her artwork. It was while I was at the hospital that I had the incredible fortune to work with a little boy who was here from Haiti. He was one of the children that Mitch Albin has brought here from the orphanage that he sponsors for medical treatment. And it's through that experience that I met him, and he really liked the work I was doing. And he invited me to work at the Say Play Detroit summer camp this past summer, and to do art with kids. And that's a camp that not only does he support, but the Detroit Tigers and the Pistons and the Detroit Lions. So when the kids signed up for camp, they thought they were going to be playing on the sports fields because they have like incredible fields with that kind of team support. And I said, well, we're also doing art. Some of these teenage boys looked at me like, right, I'm going to do art. But when I showed them the kinds of things that we were going to do, and we did portraits of Kobe Bryant, and we did gym shoes, we did all kinds of things, it became a very popular part of the camp. And in fact, one little boy came in to me and he said, I want to make another Kobe. I said, well, didn't you already do a portrait? He said, yes, but when I took it home, my neighbor bought it for $100. So, of course, he made 3 or 4 of these. I don't think he sold another one, but all the other kids it was like a competition, who can do the best Kobe. So it was really kind of a fun project. I've also done sand art in our own community. This is a project that I did with the Cancer Thrivers, which is part of Jewish Family Service. This is a large piece. It's 54 inches in width. And the Hebrew words say Lech Lecha. And it was done in memory, but to honor the founder of their group who did pass away. And Lech Lecha means go forth. And their attitude is that they have to go forth with strength. The image of the tree of life with the birds, the doves flying, but also the images of all of the 7 species. These are the things that describe the land of Israel, and whether it's your Torah Rimonim or the Torah breastplate or your wine cup or your challah boards, these are images that are often embellished on the surface. I was invited to have a show at the Taubman Gallery at U of M Hospital. And at that time, I wasn't sure what I should enter, but the program at the Gifts of Art, it's called Gifts of Art at U of M Hospital. They don't purchase artwork, but they highlight artists' work every 6 weeks. So they asked me if I was interested in having a show, and I was given pedestals to work on, which is why I did cubes, and I did each side of the cube with a different portrait. And I came up with the idea of a portrait themed piece because at that time, Edward Munch, who did the painting The Scream, it was being exhibited for the first time in many years at the Metropolitan. And that's what gave me the idea of doing the portrait. And you can see here that I have added to this portrait series. Most recently, I did the piece of Ruth Bader Ginsburg to honor our leader. I don't only work in sand, but I work in other materials, and I've been involved in community mosaics. This is a community mosaic that was done for Congregation Sheretz Tzedek. It was originally at the Laker building, which when they sold it, they moved the finished piece. But we worked with the 6th grade class. Again, how do you get kids interested to come to Hebrew school? They'd much rather be playing their sports, hanging out with their friends. So we decided to take a subject of the curriculum, and in the 6th grade, the curriculum is mitzvot. And we did a mosaic that's 17 feet wide by 8 feet tall. We worked on it for 6 weeks. Every week, kids came, they not only placed the tiles, they cut the tiles. But while we created the artwork, we talked about the theme. What is a mitzvah? And the word mitzvah, gorer mitzvah, which is the image that we placed in the Torah, means one mitzvah brings forth another. These mosaic projects that I worked on, I had a partner, Donnie Katsir, who's a glass artist, and together we were able to accomplish mosaics that we've now done throughout this, not just the city, but we actually have a piece at Columbia University, and we've done things around the country as well. We work kind of like a puzzle, so that although it's 17 feet, we have pieces so that we can work with a lot of people at one time and have the pieces placed on the table. And my favorite image in here, by the way, is the tzedakah box. It's done in the design of the JNF tzedakah box. This is a piece that we did for Temple Israel. It was done in the garden. So many of us go to their services on Friday night in good weather, in the times of good weather. And this piece says, "Make for me a sanctuary, and amongst you I will dwell." And again, the 7 species. A family came to me whose son was being bar mitzvah. They didn't want what many people have, a dance party, but their child that didn't seem to fit him. And he really had a good relationship with his grandparents, and he loved going to visit them. And they decided to do an intergenerational project. And this was created for the bar mitzvah with the help of the residents of Fleischman and the guests of the bar mitzvah. And it says, "Rise before the aged and bring beauty to those who are wise." And this is in the front lobby when you come into the building. This, along with the kinder transport, was life-altering for me. There's a family, first let me tell you, the Koval apartments are Jewish senior apartments in Oak Park. Not every resident is able to eat in a dining room with 100 or 200 people. They need smaller environments. Warren Koval is a philanthropist in our community who sponsored 3 apartments on 3 floors of one of the senior buildings. There are 12 apartments per floor, each having their own dining facility, each having 1 living room to share with only 12 people. What happened was one of the residents passed away. She did not have children, but the person who was handling the estate was a family friend. And he called me and he said they wanted to do an artwork for each floor of the apartments. So I worked with the residents on these pieces. And it was while I was working on the rabbi holding the Torah, we helped the residents. I cut the glass, but they glued all of the tiles. And you can see the fringe on the top of the Torah. And one of the residents, her name was Sydney, she was 92 years old at the time. She said to me, "Gail, I saved 2 Torahs." And I said, "What did you say, Sydney?" And I looked at my partner, Donnie, as we were cutting the glass, and she said, "Yes, they were coming for us. The Germans were coming." And we buried 2 Torahs in our yard. And after the war, she tells us, they went back, they dug up the Torahs. One of them is in Bnei Brak, Israel, and one of them is in the United States. I'm starting to choke up now. It's while they were creating this artwork that she was able to talk about it. Similarly, when they created their quilt squares, it was when they made those squares, it was healing for them. So this has a special place for me. The other 2 pieces that we did, and I think this really relates to Shalom Aleichem, to your mission with Yiddishkeit. The residents here, several of them were from little shtetls in Europe. So the pieces that we did, you can see Fiddler on the Roof, Shalom Aleichem, and actually the woman that you see here in the check jacket and as we were creating the Shalom Aleichem, the two people dancing here, she started singing the song, the prayer Shalom Aleichem. It was really something, and then the other residents joined in. And by the way, you see me, I'm still in my blue smock, which by the way, dates back to when I had young kids. My daughter would say, how can you come to school in that blue smock? And I would tell her, Emily, if you don't forget your lunch, I won't wear my blue smock. So it didn't cure her, I still wear that blue smock, but what happened was when she turned 30, I gave her a blue smock for her birthday gift, and she loved it, and she went out that night wearing high heels and the blue smock. So she even appreciates it today. This is a mosaic that was done at the Jewish Community Center when we had the Maccabi kids. We had 1,200 kids in our city that year. And when they weren't playing sports, they were in the lobby working on this mosaic. So it was really a communal piece, and people just really loved working on it. We had kids from around the world, from Great Britain, from the United States, from Venezuela, from Australia. It was a fantastic mosaic. And today it's in the building where the camp offices are, and it's still there. This is a very beautiful piece that was done of the Jewish holidays. It was a project that was conceived to work with the kids in the Hebrew schools. We worked with 12 schools. Every Sunday for several months, the 6th and 7th grade students would come to the Heckman building, and we worked on these panels. It's approximately 17 feet as well. And the amazing thing, if you remember the fire of 2008, when the firemen carried out over 200 residents, this is the only thing that survived that fire. And after the fire was put out, we contacted Art Pack, a professional art company, who came, removed it from the wall, panel by panel, cleaned it, stored it for 2 years, and today it's back in the dining room. The power of art. Donnie and I also do individual mosaic projects. Again, using art to teach. We all love the holiday of Hanukkah. Everybody made their own menorahs. And today, this is a tradition that we do at Tamarack Camp with the 14-year-old kids in the specialty division. They make their own. And it's so interesting, for the past 3 years, the Jewish News, they highlight different things going on. And every year, someone submits one of these images, and you see the Hanukkah menorahs that we've made at camp. We've also done them in a couple of the synagogues. Donnie and I have done many mosaics in the Jewish community, and I want to tell you that the original mosaic that I showed you, the first one at Sheretz Tzedek, that was funded through a grant from our federation, and it was called the Aaron DeRoy Grant, as a way to bring the arts into the curriculum. So we've done it in the curriculum of the schools, of the Hebrew schools, but we've also been in public buildings as well. And this was a project that was done for Bloomfield Hills, has a new high school, a relatively new high school. And I was contacted by someone in our community who sadly, Dolores Silberstein, lost a child, she and her husband, and in her honor and memory, they funded this piece that all of the kids got to work on. And the reason they came up with the Bloomfield Hills School at the Performing Arts section is because their daughter was so happy when she was part of the bells in the orchestra. Recently, it wasn't so recent at this point, but I was contacted by Barbara Cohn, who is very active in the Jewish Historical Society, as well as Shalom Aleichem. She's spoken for you. She was involved in a program to create a library tour for the Detroit Public Library at the main branch downtown across from the DIA. And she called me and she said, well, she didn't exactly call me. She ran into my husband in the store where she was buying a flashlight, and he had on a name tag, and it said Bob Kaplan. And she said, do you know Gail Kaplan? He said, well, that's my wife. And she said, well, I'm looking for her. Someone told me that she could create mosaics for the Detroit Public Library. And that's how we met. To make a long story short, we did 9 panels. We worked with 9 schools in the city of Detroit on subjects based on curriculum. And if you look at the design here, it's a picture of the earth with animals and different things that the kids study in the curriculum. And each project was funded differently. We had to be creative how we could get the money to do this. Everybody wants art, but not everybody has the money to pay for it. But we went to this, I wanted to work with Pastor Elementary because I knew that Marcy Feldman from our community had started a alumni group there. And I knew how dedicated she was. And I called to say, would your school be interested in being involved in this project? And she said, of course. I said, well, as long as I know you want to do it, now we have to work on the funding. And she said, well, you know, we are able to ask our alumni if they'll contribute. And in this photograph, you may recognize some of the people. In the middle next to me in the blue smock, but in the blue sweater is Penny Blumenstein, who was our past president of our federation, a great leader in our community, and she was an alumni, and she contacted all the alumni, and she made this a reality. And this is art. You know, I talk about art to heal, but art to teach. In the mosaics, we have 7 hidden images in every single mosaic. One of them is a hidden pencil. I don't know if you can find it. I might give you a clue if you look very closely. There's a little girl that has yellow banana hair, I call it, and she's holding a rake, but the rake itself is the pencil. We have other hidden images. You'll have to go to the library to find them all. But they're all things that represent literacy, from a light bulb to a pencil to a Dewey Decimal number. But they're really charming, charming pieces. This next one shows art and healing again. It's the subject of nature. About 5 years ago, I think about 5 years, they opened a new hospital, a new children's hospital, part of Children's Hospital of Michigan, but it's in the Troy location. And they wanted to make the hospital feel like home to those who were going to be using it. And we worked with 18 schools neighboring the hospital, and each school did their own design. And the third one with the image of the child wearing, has an eye patch, one of them has no hair. Those were designed by the kids because the little girl had surgery. The little boy with no hair represents the child having chemo. There's the one of the sunset and the nature. And when asked why we were choosing nature as the theme, it's because these kids couldn't go outside, so we wanted to bring nature indoors to them. There's 18 panels total, but they're divided on 3 different floors of the hospital. When it comes to art and healing, this is one of my pieces. I work in clay. This is called trompe-l'oeil, which means fools the eye. It looks like the fabric of a flag, but in fact, it's ceramic. And this is a large piece. It's about 40 inches wide, I would say. And it's created as a puzzle similar to the mosaics because I can't lift that much clay to work on it, and also to install it on the wall. But this was done after 9/11. I submitted this. Hillary mentioned I'm part of the Arts and Embassy program. This was every American ambassador who goes to a foreign country takes with them a collection of American art. And this has been to 3 different embassies, Barbados, Brazil. I can't think of the third one. And right now it's on my studio wall. But it's a really, really great piece. I love it. This one is not about art and healing, but I had to show this because this was shown at the Smithsonian in Washington. So I figured I'd put this in there for you. Again, it's trompe-l'oeil, fools the eye. I've always loved hardware. This was purchased by the family, Heckinger family, who, it's before the days of Home Depot, we had home quarters. And this family collected tool art by such people like Claude Oldenburg. So this was like on a pedestal next to Claude Oldenburg's plug. So I had to put this in there. That's one of mine. I have done realism in clay I did it for many years, and I was invited to have a one-woman show at the Janice Chair Gallery. And that's a gallery at the Jewish Community Center. And everything either has to be about Jewish art or by a Jewish artist. So I wanted to do something specifically Jewish in my trompe-l'oeil clay. So I created these 2 pieces. One of them is the Hanukkah candles, which it is made of clay, but I'm telling you, if you look at it, it smells like you can smell the wax. And the other piece is the tefillin. The tefillin, it looks like the leather straps, but if they are ceramic, trust me. and the tefillin bag has the Hebrew letters that spell tefillin. I do a lot of things today with Hebrew letters. Kind of an emotional story about this is George Vine, who was a Holocaust survivor who has passed away of blessed memory. He came up to me and he said he wanted to purchase the tefillin. And I looked at him, I was excited and emotional. And he said, Gail, when I was 13, I was in Auschwitz and I didn't have tefillin. And today his wife, Judy, who I think is here with us also right now, at the lecture, she has this piece, but George loved having it. I told you that I like doing things with Hebrew letters. You know, when I went to Hebrew school 3 days a week or 4 days a week, whatever it was, I don't know if I was listening to the teacher, but I know one thing, I was always drawing the Hebrew letters. And this is a piece that I did. I first created the letters. I made stamps in reverse so that I could stamp the clay. And I only use the letters as a design element. I can write in Chinese, I can write in Arabic. As a matter of fact, I can't write legibly in English, but in Arabic, when I worked at the hospital, kids would paint their t-shirts and they'd want their name, but they would want it in their native language. And we have a large population of Arabic speakers. And so I could draw those letters. So it's letters I've always done. This next piece, again with my Hebrew letters, I started out first doing flat pieces, then I did the bowl. And then I decided I wanted to create something really quite a bit larger. And if you remember being a kid in elementary school and you did paper mache over a balloon. So I had this idea, I had this yellow exercise ball, which by the way was in the basement. I had never exercised with it. And I decided to cover it with my clay in a similar way of working as the paper mache. And I stamped it with all the letters, and I thought the letters were just so beautiful, but they didn't say anything. But this was after I did the project at the Holocaust Center with the quilts and the Anne Frank tree. I never would have done this had I not had those experiences, because I wouldn't have had the confidence to create a memorial piece. And this is a Holocaust memorial piece. And I decided to say the word 6 million, Shisha Million, in Zachor, remember, and I glazed those in the black. Then I realized that when my son was little, we had a Lionel train set, which we still had in the box in the basement under the stairs. And I took those train tracks and I embedded them to get the shape in the clay. And I ended up entering this in a competition, in a show, and it won Best of Show. The theme of the show was Things That Move. And truly, it was the tracks that moved our people to their final destination. I had this on exhibit at the Holocaust Museum for a couple years, actually. And one day I came into the museum, and sitting next to the sphere on the track were some rocks, some stones. And you know, in our tradition, there's the tradition to place a stone when you go to a grave. And those stones, I still have them. They were from someone in our community who went to the camps on a mission, and they brought them back. So now I'm going to make you feel a little more upbeat. I went to Israel on a teacher's mission. I was invited with the Hermel and Davidson Foundation. They sponsored a teacher's mission to Israel. And the theme of the mission was how to bring Israel back into the classroom. And we had a show at the Janus Cherub, and I did a series that I called In a Box. And this is my sukkah in a box. And on the box itself, I painted it. I created beautiful stencils. And again, the 7 species. But everything in that box opens up and is hung in the sukkah to make it a festive and holy space. And it really is transforming. It's really beautiful. When I first did this, I thought I would create a series of these and try and sell them in museums, in the museum gift shops. I ended up doing 3 sets, but never through the museums. Never yet. I should never say never, not yet. But from that, I created Yad in a box. The idea is that every student, when they have their bar and bat mitzvah, they should make their own Yad to read Torah with. And in order to create a Yad, the most important part is the little finger. I couldn't buy the finger, so I had to have it made. And I had to buy 1,000 little fingers in order to make it a more cost effective. And when I work on this project, and actually this morning I was at Temple Emmanuel making yads with kids, and I tell the kids that not only did I have to buy 1,000, but so far I have bought them 18 times. So I asked the kids if they can figure out how many yads, and I will tell you, they all know the answer, 18,000 yads. I sell them to schools around the country, and it's not unusual. I would say it happens maybe once a month. I will get a photo like this in my email. I won't know who sends it, but people are so happy that their kids are using their yads, and it really adds to the experience. So these are some pictures that were sent to me by anonymous families. From that yad project, I have done beaded menorahs, beaded candlesticks, beaded everything. So I have a whole line of projects that I do sell on my website. Now, Hillary called me or emailed me, and she said, because this is going to be close to Purim, can you think of anything you've done with Purim? And I have to tell you that I actually have a Purim Grader collection. So these are not pieces that I've made, but the piece on the left is a silver and brass piece by an artist I represent, Avia Agayoff, who lives in Jerusalem. The middle piece is a beautiful wood painted one. And the one on the very right, actually the person who purchased this piece and gave it to my son as a bar mitzvah gift, Nancy Glass, I think you're here today. She gave this to him for his bar mitzvah. It's a pre-war from Poland, I believe. She bought it at an antiquity store gallery. So it's quite interesting to the collection, although it belongs to my son. But in thinking about if I've ever done anything for Purim, I realized that several years ago, I entered a show that was put on by the JCC of New York City. And it's called A Different Purim Sound, Waving Flags and Ringing Bells. And they had a catalog for the pieces that were exhibited. And the idea was when you read from the Megillah and you hear the name of Haman, you always say, boo Haman, boo Haman. But why not give credit to the woman of the story? So they had a show. The theme of the show was to create flags in honor of Esther and Vashti and to have them make sounds. So whenever you hear the name Esther or Vashti, you wave the flags. So although I don't have the piece any longer, I still had the catalog. So it was interesting. And it was a foreshadowing thing that I once was in a gallery in Israel and contacted an artist there who I wanted to connect with. And she said, well, I think I know you. I said, I don't know you. You live in Pardes Hana. I've never heard of you. She goes, were you ever in a Purim show? And I said, yes. And she says, your name was under my name in the catalog. So it's that's my Purim story, my Purim spiel. And of course, we have Passover coming up. I just thought I'd throw these in because these are Passover platters that I do. They're done with sand art, just like the asthma care piece that you saw, but these have the acrylic over them and they have beaded legs. And this is something that I came up with during the pandemic because there's so much acrylic available to us now because all of the store windows and bank windows and grocery windows, we all have all of the acrylic because of the pandemic. And so I was able to get this acrylic, which gave me the idea to do this. Now this, I can't believe that I have these slides for you. It's really amazing. But this past week, my sister is a docent. Anne is a docent at the Holocaust Center, and they have a show called The Book Smugglers. And she invited a few of us to come. Barbara Cohn, who I mentioned earlier, was also there. And Barbara has the most incredible eye. We were walking around the exhibit. And the theme of the Book Smugglers is it's from Vilna, from the YIVO Institute, that in the war years, that there were 5 people. I'm giving you a quick summary. There were 5 people, 5 Jewish prisoners who were forced to work there to go through the books that they were getting rid of, and they were preserving some for a museum for the Jewish people that would be no longer, according to Hitler. And they were getting rid of things, but the book smugglers, they're called, these 5 people who were forced to work there, they smuggled some of the documents out. And our exhibit at the Holocaust Center now had 2 images these two pieces. One of them is a bronze plaque. It was a photo of it, of Sholem Aleichem. And also the papers on the right were from his diary. We know that he was a great writer, one of the greatest Yiddish writers and playwrights and poets. And here on this document, he is writing about the character he's developing for Fiddler on the Roof, for Tevye. So both of these things relating to Sholem Aleichem were in that exhibit, and I just had to show them to you here. I thought how fitting it is. So although it is the Danzig collection that brought me to the power of art to heal, here we are today. I use it to teach, to heal, to engage the community. In the center image here, you see a mosaic that was done for Children's Hospital in Detroit. They have a new lobby. It's about 21 feet tall, this piece, and it was worked on by the patients, by the visitors, but also by the doctors, by the technicians, by the x-ray technicians, by the custodians. We all worked on this piece here. The piece on the right with the kids working is from one of the library mosaics, and the piece on the left is from one of the team building. We worked with, I've worked with the Detroit Tigers and most recently with the Detroit Red Wings, where we worked with kids who play sports with the players. So it's been pretty exciting to use my art. And at this point, I'm open to any questions anybody might have. And I guess I should stop sharing my screen now. And I'm happy to come back to see who's here.
Perfect. Well, I first of all want to say thank you so much, Gail. That was wonderful. We have a tradition where we don't necessarily applaud this way because you cannot hear us, but we use the American Sign Language way of applauding. So we're giving you a round of applause. Mazel tov. That was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. I do think it was a good presentation on my end, but the reason it looked as good as it did is because Hillary looked at my presentation and she's got those computer skills and she enhanced my blue smock everywhere. So I want to give Hillary my sincerest thanks because you really have taken me to a new level here. I know she's a great. Thank you. I just did a little bit of zhuzhing up. That's all I did. But you had the content there. I just played with the background. Yeah. But it was my pleasure. Well, so we do have a little bit of time if people have some questions. I would love to ask you a question, first of all, to start the ball rolling a little bit. I'm wondering, so I did not realize how many of your pieces I have been intimately around. I did a lot of work at the JCC in the summertime, and I've passed that mosaic numerous times, and also at Sherazedek, and walked by them. And if you have a chance to see some of Gail's mosaics, please. I mean, she does beautiful work. I have some of her sand art in my own kitchen that she helped for Tu B'Shvat to make, but they are just gorgeous, and the colors, it's just stunning. But I'm curious, from the time of conception, where someone brings you an idea and says, we want to do, and I'm sure it varies depending, but just for example, the Sherazedek art piece that you did, the mosaic there, from the time that you were asked to start the creative process through to the final placing on the wall, how long does that take you?
Well, I think the one to easily talk about would be the one in the hospital that you just saw that's like 20 feet tall. It took me a few months to figure it out and had to get the supplies, and we pre-cut all of the glass before we work on it. But because we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working on it, we actually accomplished the mosaic, and also the ones for the panels for the hospital. We actually accomplished the physical putting it together in the hospital piece, like a 4x8 foot panel or a 3x5 panel for the library. It only takes maybe a day to create the actual piece. If you already have the design implemented, if you have it outlined, there's a lot of prep work that goes into the mosaics. But the actual executing it, we did the panel, the holiday panel that survived the fire. We worked on that for maybe 8 weeks on Sunday mornings. So, we have a lot of people that work on it at one time. Again, it's not done as one piece. It's composed of usually 10, 12 pieces broken down like puzzle pieces.
Right. Well, that's just phenomenal. It's really just beautiful. All right. I see that Margaret Winters has her hand raised. If you, before I let her speak, if you want to follow Sheila Bass's example where she has raised her hand electronically, you may do so, or you may go old school and raise your hand and I will go around and call. For right now, we'll go with Margaret first because I happen to catch her eye, then Sheila, and then Shirley.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Do you know if any of the children you work with have been inspired to go on and become artists themselves, or at least pursue it some more?
I could tell you a few stories. First of all, the little girl holding the rake in that mosaic, you know, this is a great story. She's a little girl. She's young. She was maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade. She wouldn't look anybody in the eye.
I think Gail's internet might be having a little bit of a problem. Let's give her a second. Well,
and when she came to the dedication at the library, yep.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to have you start your story again because I think your internet popped out for just a second and we lost you for just a second. So if you start your story over, we will be able to hear it because you're back on.
You can hear me? Okay. The little girl who worked on that banana head girl holding the rake in the earth mosaic, she wouldn't look at me in the eye, but when she saw her piece up there, she kept tugging at my sister, like on her shirt, trying to get her attention. She wouldn't look at her. And we finally, Anne looked down at her and she goes, "What do you want? Tell me something." She goes, "That's my girl." So she was so proud that her work was up there, that not only, I mean, these are not all kids who get academic achievement, but not only was she there with her class, but her mother came and her aunt came. I worked with a little girl who was a burn victim at the hospital, and she continues to do a lot of art. And this actually yesterday, Mitch Album, I told you, he brings kids here for medical treatment, and he also works with some kids who they've helped with college. And one of the kids was at my studio yesterday. And the first few times that we painted t-shirts, he would tell me what he wanted to paint. And I would draw it and he would paint it. And just yesterday, he said to me, "Can I do the drawing now?" And he did some beautiful, beautiful pieces. So these are really it makes the kids feel good because the projects that I do, they're not intimidating. The kids really work on them and they realize that they can do them. And they're part of a bigger project, you know, when they do the mosaics. And very often we will do a mosaic and then I will have people come to my studio, and several of the kids in the community have come to my studio to create other pieces with their own design.
Thank you.
That's stupendous. All right, I think Gail froze for just a second, but she's back now. So Sheila, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask Gail a question?
Well, it's a comment, really. I'm absolutely amazed at the different media in which you work. I don't think I've ever known an artist to work in so many different media, and it's really impressive. Also, I have a question. The square in one of the quilts by Ruth Adler, the one with the little suitcase and things, the little girl, was that Ruth Adler who was in Michigan? Okay, she was an interior decorator, I believe.
No.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, right. She actually thought I was using her name for something, and I said, "Ruth, this is not your piece. It was not her." So the answer is no. Yeah.
Also, I have a comment. The silver pieces from the Torah that you were polishing, you know, the Mosaic synagogue in Prague has the exhibition of the breastplates that were, you know, it was the Museum of the Extinct Race. And my husband was bar mitzvahed in that shul.
Oh, wow.
And we were there. So just a little aside, okay?
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing.
I was telling, can you hear me now?
Yes.
One of the schools, I sell my yads, I told you, in my Judaica to schools around the country. And I was talking to one of the educators recently on Zoom, And she said, what else are you working on? And I said, well, I'm doing a lecture for you, for Shalom Aleichem. And she asked what it's about. And I told her what it was. And I used the example of the rabbi holding the Torah. And she goes, well, I want you to do the lecture for our 7th graders because our synagogue, we just purchased or got a scroll from Czechoslovakia.
Wow. That's wonderful. How lovely. Shirley, you had your hand up. By all means, go right ahead.
I want to tell that I was so honored to do the narration for the Kindertransport, the quilt. It was just thrilling for me to be able to participate in that. And also, I cherish one of your Ruth Bader Ginsburg artworks that is on my table all the time. I just love it.
Well, not only was Shirley involved in that project, but Shirley's husband, Bob, was our photographer. So that's why it's so well documented everywhere.
Yeah, Bob did everything.
Lovely. That's wonderful. David Mendelberg, I see your hands up. You just need to unmute so we can hear you, and then you're welcome to ask your question or comment.
Okay. I'm wondering if you ever do images of biblical characters or biblical scenes.
Well, I'll never say never. I'm trying to think if I've done some Bible. Well, of the Passover platters that I'm doing now, I showed the one of the frog. I also have a Passover platter with Moses on it.
Sorry.
So in the past, I haven't done a lot of figurative, but more recently I am doing more with figures.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, David, sorry, you were muted. If you wanted to finish your sentence, I'm sorry. You can unmute, David. There you go.
My phone ringing, I'm sorry. But thank you very much for that.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming, and it was really this has really been an honor for me. And again, I think a highlight has been working with Hillary. It's really and truly has been wonderful, and I've always known of a Shalom Aleichem, and it's just wonderful to feel that I can be a part of it. So
Well, thank you. Well, you are certainly welcome to participate anytime. Nancy, I see you have your hand up. You wanted to ask a question. You just need to unmute, Nancy, and we'll be able to hear you.
No, not yet. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, well, I've met Gail in Israel, or here studying for a Federation program to go to Israel many, many years ago. What I found is that I've been able to take my grandchildren to do projects with Gail. And it makes those holidays, usually they've had to do with holidays, and it makes it very special that they have a piece of art that it connects them to their Judaism. And I've done it as gifts for bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah friends. And I think it's very special because they remember it. And I think knowing that they know an artist, that they got to work with an artist, I think that's something Gail brings, often brings to the community. I think it's really special.
I want to add, thank you, Nancy, and I love working with your grandkids. I call it Bubby Zadie art classes, but I do it with everybody, not just Jewish.
Right.
In fact, I recently did Christmas ornaments with kids kicking cancer. We just recently did that project. But I do a lot of workshops in my studio, and I am willing to go to other places to do workshops. And the idea of continuing creating art with the next generation is makes me proud and very happy. And there's a new program that was just written up in the Jewish Center about the Jewish Center doing a program for grandparents to do art to do projects with their kids to help to build their Judaism. So that's something generation to generation. So we are, working on, and I hope to be a part of some of the projects that they do. And also, I recently did a project, before the pandemic at West Bloomfield High School, and we did an art piece, a community piece for the school building. And one of the kids looked at me, he says, I think I know you. And I said, well, I don't know. I've done a lot of art. I've worked in the schools and synagogues. He goes, you did my yard with me. And this was a kid that was graduating and going to college. So it's, these are projects, whether they're in the hospital or in the schools, the kids and the families, they remember it. So
Absolutely. Well, we have just been so thrilled. I'm going to remove Gail's spotlight real quick and so we can see everybody again. But we have just been so thrilled to have Gail. We are hoping at some point, as things hopefully, fingers crossed, open up because of post-pandemic, someday I'll be able to feel like we are post-pandemic. We are hopeful that we will be able to invite Gail back to do an actual project with us and actually be able to do art in person. And if not, we can certainly figure out a way. She's very creative, and I think between the two of us, we can figure out a way to do it virtually as well. So we don't leave.
I do things virtually, and I'm working around the country that way virtually, not just because of the pandemic.
Exactly. So, but look, Gia, as we continue to expand our program offerings, please, keep your eye out, because we want to have Gail back and be able to actually experience some of her work hands-on. And so it should be just a wonderful experience. I know from working with her in the past, it's just been really, really wonderful. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this afternoon. I know I felt laughter and tears throughout this entire program, so it was really beautiful. It was the full gamut and just what I needed on this snowy afternoon in Michigan. So thank you so very much again, Gail. We really, really appreciate it. We are recording, and I will post the recording to our webpage, and it will be available on our YouTube page, so that if you have friends that you think would enjoy seeing some of this information, they would be more than welcome to go back and view it again. And we just want to thank you, and we will look forward to seeing some of you at some of our future programming. So thank you all very, very much. Have a lovely afternoon, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. And one more round of applause for Miss Gail. Thank you so much.
It was fabulous.
Thank you. And this